The Whispering Forest. A small village nestled at the edge of a vast, mysterious forest. The villagers lived in harmony with nature, but they were always cautious of the forest's dark secrets. The forest had a reputation for being magical, but not in the friendly way many might think. It was said that those who ventured too deep into its heart would hear whispers on the wind, soft voices calling out to them. Some claimed that the forest was alive, and that it could communicate with those who listened closely enough. Others believed that the whispers came from lost souls, who had wandered too far and never returned. Emma, a young woman who had recently moved to the village, had always been intrigued by the forest. She had heard the stories, of course, but she didn't believe in such things. She was a skeptic at heart, someone who trusted only what she could see and touch. But there was something about the forest that called to her, something that stirred her curiosity. One autumn afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Emma decided to explore the forest. She wasn't afraid, despite the stories the villagers had told her. After all, she reasoned, if the forest was truly magical, she would be able to understand its secrets. She packed a small bag with water, snacks, and a map of the village and set off toward the forest. The moment she entered the forest, she felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. The air was cool, and the leaves crunched beneath her feet as she walked. The trees were tall and ancient, their branches stretching out like arms reaching for the sky. The forest seemed alive in its own way, but it wasn't frightening, at least, not at first. As she ventured deeper, the sounds of the village faded into silence. It was as if the forest had swallowed them whole. The only noise now was the occasional rustling of leaves, and the distant call of birds. Emma looked around, taking in the beauty of the forest, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. Suddenly, she heard it, a soft whisper, barely audible, coming from behind a thicket of trees. Emma froze, her heart racing. She looked around, but saw nothing. The whisper came again, this time a little louder, as though it were calling her name. Emma, her breath caught in her throat. She took a cautious step forward, her curiosity overcoming her fear. The voice seemed to be guiding her deeper into the forest, pulling her toward something. She had no idea what she was following, but she couldn't stop herself. The deeper she went, the more she felt the forest change. The trees grew thicker, their trunks twisted in strange shapes. The air became heavier, and the whispers grew louder, swirling around her like an invisible wind. It was as if the forest itself was alive, breathing with her, drawing her closer to its heart. Finally, after what felt like hours of walking, Emma reached a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient oak tree, its bark gnarled and twisted. At its base was a stone altar, covered in moss and vines. The whispers grew louder now, filling her ears with voices that seemed to come from all around her. Emma, come closer. Despite the fear building inside her, Emma felt compelled to approach the altar. As she stepped closer, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Carved into the stone was her name, etched into the surface as though it had always been there. What is this? She whispered to herself, her voice shaking. The air around her seemed to shimmer, and suddenly, the whispers stopped. Everything fell silent. Emma stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. Then, a low voice spoke from the shadows of the trees. You found the heart of the forest. The voice said, its tone deep and ancient. You were always meant to. Emma spun around, but there was no one there. The voice seemed to come from the very trees themselves. Who are you? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. We are the guardians of the forest, the voice replied. We have watched over this land for centuries, and now you are part of it. Emma felt a sudden surge of understanding, as though the forest was no longer just a collection of trees and wildlife, but a living, breathing entity. She felt connected to it, as though she were a part of something much larger than herself. You've heard our whispers because you are ready, the voice continued. You have the gift of listening, of understanding. The forest calls to those who can hear it. Emma took a deep breath, her fear slowly fading as she realized the truth. The forest wasn't trying to harm her. It was simply offering her a place within it. She had been chosen, not just to explore, but to protect. With a new sense of purpose, Emma placed her hand on the stone altar. As she did, the forest seemed to come alive around her. The leaves rustled, the trees swayed, and the air was filled with a sense of peace. She knew that she had been given a gift, one that would forever change the way she saw the world. From that day forward, Emma returned to the forest often, learning its secrets and listening to the whispers of the trees. She became its guardian, its voice, and the forest welcomed her as one of its own.